If you've been following the miracles of Jesus with me, I hope you've seen the pattern. When Jesus performs a miracle, he doesn't shout out, "Hey, gather around, come over here, check out what I'm about to do." He wasn't looking for power, and he wasn't looking for fame. The miracles of Jesus are about one thing, and that is compassion. Before he speaks or acts, he sees. And that's what happens in our next story, which is the miracle of Jesus healing the 10 lepers. Now, this story takes place near the end of his ministry, when he was traveling south, heading towards Jerusalem for the very last time. The cross has always been in view for Jesus, but now it's near. And even so, he keeps stopping for people that others wouldn't even look at. Luke is the one who shares this story, and I love that it's Luke because he was a very caring man with a heart for the ones who lived on the margins. So did Jesus, and that really was unusual, very atypical of what the culture valued at that time and place. This miracle takes place on the border between Samaria and Galilee. It's like a no man's land. The Jews did not like the Samaritans and vice versa. So to be in between these two places was like being in a completely hostile environment. And this is where Jesus shows up. He never cared about invisible lines drawn on a map. He always cared about people. So as he's entering a small village, he hears voices calling out from a distance. And there are 10 men standing far enough away to actually follow the law, but close enough to be heard. And they're shouting, "Hey, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." They're lepers. And that word carried so much weight back then because leprosy wasn't just a disease, it was a living death. You didn't just get sick, you got cut off. Once the priest declared you unclean, everything about your life ended. You were sent outside the city, away from your family, your community, your faith. You couldn't work. You couldn't worship. You couldn't even touch another person. And every time someone came near you, you had to warn them by shouting out, "Unclean." Imagine having to announce to others your own rejection wherever you went. I hear the story today, and it reminds me of that first year of COVID, when people were suddenly cut off from everyone they loved, families separated by glass, funerals on screens, people who died alone because of the laws. That was a glimpse of what lepers lived every day back then. One day you were a part of the community, and the next you were gone, an outcast, forgettable, untouchable. And yet somehow these men had heard about Jesus. Stories about Jesus just have a way of getting around. Maybe they had heard about how he touched another leper and healed him with a single word. Maybe they had heard about the blind man who could see again, or the woman who reached out and was made whole. Whatever it was, they recognized something in him that felt like a last hope. So they called out, and Jesus looks right at them. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't step back. He sees them. And yet what he says next is surprising. We would think he would just say, "Be healed," as he's done before. And he doesn't walk over and touch them either. Instead, he says, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." Now, that had to have sounded strange to them and to his disciples, because typically you only went to the priest when you were healed. They were the ones who could declare you clean again and restore your life in community. But at this point, nothing had changed. Their bodies were still scarred with the disease, and still they went. They took the first step. They didn't ask questions. They simply trusted his word enough to take that first step. And somewhere between where they stood and where they were going, something began to happen. The pain eased, and the sores healed, and color returned to their faces. And before they even reached the village gate, they were clean. 10 men were healed. 10 lives were restored. But that's not the end of our story, because one of them, only one, stops walking. And he looks down at himself and he realizes what has happened. And something inside of him says, well, I can't just keep going on. I've got to go back. So he turns around and he runs back the way he came. And he falls at Jesus' feet, praising God with a voice that must have been filled with tears of happiness. Luke adds a small detail that really changes everything. The man was a Samaritan, an outsider among outsiders. And he's the one who recognized what really happened. He doesn't just see his own healing. He sees the healer. And Jesus says, weren't 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except for this foreigner? You could almost hear the sadness in his voice, because really he gave them more than just physical healing. He gave them a whole life again, a way to go home and be with their family and community. And yet only one of them came back. Then Jesus says to him, rise and go. Your faith has made you well. That's what I love about this story. It's not just what Jesus did. It's how he engaged. He saw, he spoke, he sent, and then he waited for their response. Definitely every miracle tells us something about him, but it also tells us something about us. In this one, it asks kind of a hard question. When God moves in our lives, do we keep walking or do we stop? Do we acknowledge him, thank him for what he's done, or do we just move on? The blessings of Jesus, the healings, they weren't only about recovery, they were about relationship, about being drawn back to the one who gave you the gift in the first place. And here's what's easy to miss. That moment when the Samaritan turned back was more than gratitude, it was worship. The word Luke uses for thanks comes from Eucharisto, the same word later to describe the table of communion and the sharing of the Eucharist. It is an act of thanksgiving. And in that moment, this man demonstrated thanksgiving by offering himself. Gratitude transformed his physical healing into a complete wholeness, a restoration of his body, his mind, and his soul. 10 were healed, but only one was made whole. And maybe that's the quiet miracle in this story. That gratitude doesn't just restore what's broken, it renews the soul. I think we all have something in common with those 10 men. We all know what it feels like to stand at a distance, to wonder if we've gone too far, or we've been marked by something that we can't fix, or maybe your sickness is regret or shame, or a story in your life that you wish you could rewrite. And yet Jesus meets us there, in the space in between, where we are lost, we are set aside, and where we will find restoration with him. He still looks at us and says, go. Trust me, you're already on your way. And when I find that I have been healed or restored, I hope I will be the one who turns back. Not just to say thank you, but to fall at his feet. Because my gratitude is really worship. Well, if you like this story, you can find more stories about Jesus on my website, sandylaws.com. Lots of information there, including a lot of free stuff, devotionals, etc., all about Jesus. Next time we'll meet a fisherman who thought his failure was the end of the story, until Jesus fills his empty net with grace and gives him a brand new beginning. Thank you, and God bless you.